STEPS Module 4. In this module, we will discuss the documentation. Documentation is crucial for the success of the STEPS program. We have developed forms which you may find useful. Feel free to adapt the wording to better meet your specific needs and the requirements of your county. The important thing is that you're consistent within your county. We will review the STEPS brochure, which is useful for teachers and parents, screening log, parent information and permission forms, students enrolled in the STEPS program, the activities form, and the dismissal letter. We have developed a brochure which summarizes the STEPS program and hopefully answers most of the questions parents and teachers may have. As you screen students, you may want to include STEPS as another option besides just pass, recheck, and refer. The parent letter is useful in obtaining permission from the parent for their child to participate in the STEPS program. Within the letter, there's a brief description of the STEPS program, and also there's a place for you to be very specific about your concerns regarding the child's speech and language skills. This parent letter could be presented at the dismissal meeting. A child has been in speech therapy and they're ready to be dismissed. It explains that specialized instruction is no longer needed because the focus now is on generalization, not learning a new skill. At the bottom, there's a place for the written permission from the parents. You'll notice that the permission is for STEPS. That means all the steps. In this way, you can move back and forth based on what the student needs without having to contact the parent. Another crucial form of documentation is the list of students that you're serving. Of course, you need that, but it's also critical for supporting what you're doing besides the caseload that you have. It, in essence, justifies part of your workload. Some lead therapists or administrators request these copies periodically. The activities form includes all activities, the education, the prevention, and the periodic reviews. We have attempted to make this form as functional and all-inclusive as possible. The top section includes a place for you to provide the basic identifying information about the student. And then it provides different columns for the inclusion of relevant information. The first column includes the date of any of the services, whether it's a direct service, a consultation, a review, or an assessment. The next column is the activity column. The progress column would be used to estimate the progress during intervention sessions or progress identified during assessments. As the student's STEPS program is periodically reviewed, the speech-language pathologist would determine the next steps. They would decide whether to continue the student in the STEPS program, dismiss them, refer them to special education for speech therapy with an IEP, or suggest an outside option to the parent. And in this section, the speech-language pathologist would write notes. Some therapists choose to collect data during each session. The data would go here as well. The activity codes that could be used could go in this column. They include I for individual, G for group, P for packet, like sending a packet home, C for consult with teacher or parent, O for observation, and A for assessment. The estimation of progress, or progress codes, would go in this column. M for mastered, GP for good progress, MP for minimal progress, and NP for no progress. And as mentioned earlier, this could be the way that the therapist documents the progress during a session or during their assessments. During the periodic reviews, the speech-language pathologist makes decisions about next steps. Will they continue the student in STEPS, dismiss them from STEPS, refer them to special education speech therapy, or consider providing information about additional outside options to the parents. If you refer a student for special education speech therapy, this means that the student's speech-language disorder is impacting academic performance, and participation in STEPS has revealed the need for specialized instruction. If you suggest outside options to families, it is because the student's speech-language disorder is not impacting academic performance, and yet participation in STEPS has revealed the need for specialized instruction. At the bottom of the page is a place for summarizing information about the student's participation in the STEPS program. This would be useful if the student is moving to another school or a different county, or if they're being dismissed because they've mastered their targeted skills, or they're being referred to special education. It more or less summarizes why you're discontinuing your documentation. This is an example of a completed form. At a glance, you can see when the student participated in an activity, the type of activity, and the student's progress in that activity. You can easily see when the student was assessed and when a review of the STEPS program took place. You can see all of this without having to look into the notes to find the relevant details. Because the form is a Word document, it can be adapted to meet your needs. You may not want to include the codes, but rather provide more space for detailed notes. But in the notes, make sure you indicate the type of activity that the student participated in, a documentation of progress, whether it's data or some explanation, the assessment results, and that there is a clear way to indicate periodic reviews. So someone can look and say that, yes, you reviewed the students every so often. Each county should be consistent in their documentation, though. Here is a letter celebrating dismissal. It's important to notify the parent of the conclusion of the STEPS program. As a county, you will need to decide how and where the documentation will be maintained, especially as the end of the school year approaches. Should a student move to another school within the county, the documentation, of course, would go with them. Otherwise, the receiving SLP may think that the student was missed during screening, or somehow the therapist didn't pick up on the problems they have. Also, the documentation should be maintained in case the therapist leaves the school. The documentation would stay with the student. When a student moves to a different county or to a different state, it's important to somehow send that information along with the student. Again, those decisions would be made in your county. It is also suggested that participation in the STEPS program should also be documented in the notes section on the WEVAS screening results. For more information, or should you have questions, you can contact Leanne Brammer, the coordinator for Speech Language Impaired at the Office of Special Education and Student Support.